Hello everyone, welcome back to A1 Politics and Civics. Today's lesson is going to be another Civics 101. We will be talking about the Electoral College. So the Electoral College is how the United States elects our president. You don't vote directly for the president when you vote in your state. You vote for a slate of electors nominated by your party in the presidential election. So that group of electors, depending on who wins the state, will be certified by the state legislature and cast their votes at the Electoral College for the winner of your state's popular vote. You can think of the Electoral College as 50 mini-elections, one held in each state. Each state has a certain number of electoral votes. They come from the number of senators in each state, which is 2, and the representatives in the House from that state. For example, small states like Vermont and North Dakota only have 3 electoral votes, while larger states like Texas and California have 40 and 54 respectively. Illinois has 19 electoral votes, with 2 senators and 17 representatives in the House. Electoral votes are winner-take-all. The candidate who wins each state is going to win all of that state's electoral votes, though there are 2 exceptions. The first candidate to 270 electoral votes wins. Down at the bottom, we have 538, which is a political analysis website run by ABC News. That's the total number of electoral votes up for grabs, with 438 House members, 100 senators, and then 3 electoral votes from DC. 270 to win is a mapping website. It's called that because you need 270 electoral votes to win, half of 538, and plus 1 for the majority. There is variation by state in that Maine and Nebraska split their electoral votes by state winner and congressional district. They both award 2 electoral votes to the overall winner of the state. Each congressional district in the state also gets its own electoral college vote. I did a longer video going more in depth on that process and what would happen if the entire country ran elections in that manner. I'll link it in the description. Washington, D.C., despite not being a state, still gets 3 electoral votes.
Yay!
It's mandated constitutionally that D.C.'s electoral votes cannot exceed the smallest state's number of electoral votes. So gain or lose electoral votes based on their census results. 2020 hurt Republicans because in the post-census report, it turned out that Republican states got shorted, and therefore a couple of them, like Texas and Florida, should have had additional congressional districts. This would result in them having more electoral votes. Faithless electors are people who vote for someone other than whom they are assigned to vote. It could come into play with a very close electoral college margin. Penalties and remedies vary by state. You can see in the map that some states do not count the vote, some void the vote with a penalty, some count it but the elector is penalized, and then other states just don't have any laws whatsoever. Faithless electors did come into play in 2016. You saw lots of people other than Hillary Clinton and Donald Trump in the map down in the bottom left receive electoral votes. This included people Colin Powell, Faith Spotted Eagle, Rand Paul, John Kasich, and Bernie Sanders all received electoral votes, but it didn't end up mattering because the margin of victory was too great. Now what happens if the candidates tie? Well, it comes into effect if no candidate reaches 270 electoral votes, and that can happen if a third-party candidate won a key state. Or, in this case, you can see that the math on the map worked out, a 269 to 269 tie. This was part of the strategy for the Trump campaign in the aftermath of the 2020 election. They wanted Mike Pence to throw out the contested slates of states. This would include the swing states so that no candidate would reach 270 electoral votes, and then the following process would happen. If the candidates tie, the election goes into the House of Representatives. Each state's House delegation votes one time for president, and requires 26 states to win. This has to be a majority, not just a plurality. If there's, for example, 8 different candidates, you still must win 26 of the 50 states. You can't win a plurality, which would look like 21 states to one candidate, 20 to another, and 9 to a third. 21 is not enough, you have to have 26. Then the senators elect vice president with 51 votes. Again, this has to be a majority, not a plurality. When we talk about each state's House delegation, this includes all of their representatives in the House. For example, Texas would have a bunch of Republican representatives, and California would have a bunch of Democrat representatives, and so they would outweigh the other factions' votes in each state. However, each state, regardless of size, still only counts as one vote. Wyoming, North Dakota, South Dakota all have one vote, and so they all count the same. We use the Electoral College because Article 2, Section 1 of the Constitution establishes it as procedure for selecting the president. You can see the text there on the left. This was put into place because lots of the Founding Fathers feared mob rule. Plato and Aristotle influenced the Founding Fathers, and both of those philosophers really did not like the idea of a democracy. They viewed it as an imperfect or devolved form of government. Plato's ideal form of government was the aristocracy, where a government was ruled by a philosopher king. They also then preferred the oligarchy over a democracy. This influenced our government at the beginning of the country because you couldn't vote unless you were a white man who held property, because the founders felt that holding property gave you more of a say in how things were run, and you would use your vote more intentionally because you were the one being most affected by the decisions of your government that you elected. You can see another example of this philosophy in the election of senators from each state. Previously, they were elected by state legislatures until the 17th Amendment passed in 1913. That amendment allows for popular election of your state's senators, which we have now. There are some criticisms of the Electoral College. First off is that the popular vote winner does not equal the Electoral College winner. This has happened 5 times, most recently in 2016. I tend to think that both candidates know the rules that they're playing by. One of the ways I consider this argument is that popular vote is like yards of offense in a football game, but electoral college votes are like points. You can have a lot of offense and you can have a lot of votes. Unless your offense translates it to points, you're still going to lose the game. Again, both candidates know this when they agree to run for president. Another criticism is that a vote in California is not worth the same as it is in North Dakota. California, you have one electoral vote for about 200,000 people. North Dakota gets one electoral vote for 78,000 people. So you can say that North Dakotans have a vote that is worth 3 times as much as any Californian. One final criticism is that states tend to stay in the category of which they are assigned. This means that you don't see a whole lot of swing states becoming safe states or safe states becoming swing states, and so the election tends to be concentrated in the same areas over time. This map is from 2012 when Barack Obama was seeking his second term against Mitt Romney. There are some changes in these states. Georgia is much closer to a toss-up or a swing state, and Texas is much closer than it used to be. There are some states that are less competitive. For example, Iowa and Ohio have moved from being toss-up states in this map to really solid Republican states. Virginia has become more Democratic, Florida has moved hard right off of a cliff, but New Hampshire and Wisconsin are still toss-up states. Colorado is more blue, Arizona has now become a toss-up state, though it does lean Republican. But the main crux of the argument here is that the center of the country has stayed red and the coasts have stayed blue, and because of that, you'll hear some people talk about wasted votes and saying that the votes in your safe state are not going to matter, and so that might lead to depressed turnout, and so people won't vote. They know that if you live in one of these states, that when it comes to deciding whether or not you will vote, people might stay home. These are 2 graphs I've made. You can see these are 2016 Democrat states and 2016 Republican states. Look at the percentage margin of victory for Clinton on the left and Trump on the right. You can see that the closer the state is in margin, the higher the turnout is. This does lend some credence to the theory that people stay home if they know their vote won't matter. Now that we know what the Electoral College is, can we change it? There is some polling support for the Electoral College being changed. 90% of Democrats support a national popular vote, while only 1 in 4 Republicans agrees. This is reflected in leadership as well, with 18 of 26 Democrat candidates in 2020 saying that they were in favor of or open to abolishing the Electoral College. Tim Walz recently stated at a fundraiser that the Electoral College needed to go. So generally speaking, you see much more support for that on the Democratic side of things. However, it must be done through a constitutional amendment, and the requirements for that are quite high. A constitutional amendment must be ratified by 3/4 of the state legislatures, or when 2/3 of the House and the Senate agree to it. You will also hear about the National Popular Vote Interstate Compact, and essentially that is states who have signed a pledge to give their electoral votes to the winner of the popular vote. However, that does not come into effect until the states who have signed equal 270 electoral votes. Once they are, they pledge to give the winner of the popular vote their electoral votes. This is a measure supported exclusively by Democratic states. Until it goes into effect, all of the states award their electoral votes in the same manner that every other state does. If you enjoyed today's content, please be sure to like and subscribe, and forward this video to a friend who needs to see it.